Hello everyone, my name is Garth. I'm an ex-Rise to War player, just starting here on War of Nova. This is my very first video I've ever made. I didn't even make content for Rise to War, but this game still seems to be pretty early. There's a lot of bugs and things that they're working through, and with the closure of Rise to War, I was definitely looking for another game. This one was on top of my list, captured my attention. I went through that whole list, made a determination of which one I liked the most, and honestly, I kept coming back to this one. So, sold for now. Not the biggest fan of the space theme, but I have heard that they are bringing a possible alternate appearance that makes it look like land battles. Very interested to see what that's going to look like, but only time will tell. So for now, space theme will work because it reminds me a lot of Rise to War 1.0. Um, with that, it's funny because I really did not like 2.0 when it came to Rise to War, but after playing it for the past few years, I've realized that it kind of made me soft in some areas. So there's definitely some things about 2.0 that I miss, but I am also glad to be back towards a 1.0 style. One of the big things about this game is that a free to play or low spender can compete. That was huge in Rise to War before 2.0 came, where it was just one meta. You used almost one army. There was very little variation in that, and you just had to pump money into it. This brings it back to the roots that brought me into Rise to War, beyond just being uh, Hi, Abby. Sorry, that's my daughter. She's in here having a good time as well. As I told you, it's my first video, so I don't really have a studio or a location in order to do this quietly or peacefully. So the duties of dad comes first. And like I was saying, it's nice to have this variety back where there are counters, there are specific ships that are used in specific instances, and even a low spender or free to player can utilize some of those rare ships, the blue ones, the starting ships, and they can still compete. I love that. I miss that. Um, so before I get too far off the track, I'm going to explain what I'm doing here and why I decided to make a video. So on their Discord, they had a option to submit, or sorry, a contest to submit a PVE build. They gave you 4 ships to pick from, and I chose Cypher. Cypher is my absolute favorite starting ship so far. It's a monster. I have done various testing with him, and I decided to give a submission. So through here, I gave my submission, and I noticed that several people in this Discord were talking about wanting to know how to read reports because reports are read a little bit differently here than they were in Rise to War, but also some people may not know how to read them at all. And learning how to read these reports are very important because this is how we're capturing bugs right now for the developers to work on. This is how we understand how things are interacting, what's good, what's not good, what caused you to win that fight but lose the next fight, even though you're fighting the same ships. These are very vital and important to understand, and they can help you optimize your build. So I had posted at the end of my submission, basically stating, "Hey, you know, if you guys like the way I think, the way I build, I have no problem trying to do a guide on covering the reports." Um, as you can see here, we've got an individual who was basically like, "Yeah, I'd love to hear how to read reports." Um, so with that, I'm a person that is a visual. I That's why I have screenshots and things in my build is because I have to be able to see it. Just talking about it doesn't always click for me. So that's why I was like, you know what? Let's move past this, not making videos and just kind of talking to people in the background and such, and let me put my knowledge out there and work together with some of these other work together with some of these other content creators and individuals who are part of this team and see if we can really boost this up, really build up War of Nova. I noticed that it doesn't have a massive population of players right now, but I think that's going to change. They're moving in the right direction, and they actually have developers who are listening and caring. And I've seen a lot in my short amount of time here, and that's something that I truly cherish. and I know that they're not here just for money and for greed, and they're going to do whatever they want regardless of what the players are saying. So I'm going to stick around for a little while. Might as well give this a go. We'll see how this video is received, and we may make future videos. So I'll slip back to War of Nova. Here I am at my base station. Um, I'm in one of the starting season ones. Very short time, as you can tell, because we're already moving to season 2. Um, we made it maybe halfway through. That's a very short amount of time. We should have made it all the way to the end, but here we are. They wanted to bring all the season ones back together into a season 2, and we'll see how that goes. Looks like had a lot of mixed feelings in the beginning. So we rushed immediately trying to go to PvP. So on my map, we'll see we're kind of all just took our base starting areas. We had some major players already: Ograx, Vanguard, Tyrannus, and Stonar. Those immediately were some of the stronger front runners, and so they were able to get out and start the combat. Smaller group, not a lot of people joined over here. I had started my own guild in order to bring some friends over, and then everybody who chose to play in Arcos pretty well came over and joined underneath my guild. So it's a small little guild, but we're having fun. Reached out to Terra over here. They got 2 different guilds, and we set up a PvP zone. So we decided to meet here in the middle. Well, that did not take me where I wanted to go. See, that's another bug. Be a little irritating at times, but it's okay. As you see, we just reach out and go again. So if I come down here, you can see that, okay, we got somebody coming in to fight an empty tile. Interesting. But we've set up a bastion here, and we're trying to get PvP started. We've got a few from Terra here, and then we have quite a few from my own little team here. So I've only had one PvP battle because we only just reached each other last night, and I wanted to pull up the particular report from the guide that I submitted. So I'm gonna open this up. I'll scroll down just a little bit. Actually, we had a lot of siege since we're not gonna do that. We'll do this 300 tile here. So Corruptor, huge, absolutely huge. It's one of the really good ships in the game. As you can see, it gave my Cypher a run for its money. When you go against a more equal, not necessarily one that's going to hinder my abilities and such, you'll see that it goes just phenomenal with Cypher. He's just a monster here. So I'm looking at the report. I can see, right off the bat, some of the ships that were used. I can see the tiers of the ships, 2, 3, how many they had, how many were killed, and kind of the overall win or loss of it, right? So now I'm going to click my details. And here we got a few more stats going on. Still the overall general screen. We can see the ship's damage. We can see strike craft damage. And we can see the damage that was received on both sides. So just some basic numbers and things just to get us started and see what we're working with. We got our summary. Summary breaks it down a little more, so now we know who's dealing what damages and who took what damages, how many are died, things like that. So the big thing for the reports is combat logs. So combat is done over 10 rounds. And as you'll notice, you start with a pre-combat, and it'll go all the way to the 10 rounds. If you get past the 10 rounds and there's still life on both sides, you will draw. That's what a draw is. If you don't, as you see, wherever the last one was, that's where it's going to stop. It's done there. And now we have a report. So as we click through, we can see these numbers aren't entirely accurate. We know that there's some visual bugs related with this, but these, for the most part, are going to tell you kind of like, hey, how are we doing on each round? So round 1, you can see again, massive damage out of the Cypher. That's why I chose him to be the guy that I wanted to submit. Just huge. And then I chose tank troops. And look, even just the tanks troops are doing very well against tier 3s. Tier 3s. This is PvE, so of course I'm going to end up performing better even at a lower level. PvP is what's really gonna show the difference, and once I start getting some of those reports, I may come back and cover them. But this video is about reading reports, and so I'm going to show you what we're looking for in here. So we're going to click this little spyglass up here on pre, and now we're reading all of the details. So this right here is telling you what is happening in the back end on the server when it's running the batch of combat. It's running all that, and then it's generating this visual that we can see. So this is how it's going to read out to us. We have, my Cypher units, Dark Fang units, so and so. So that's just kind of where we're starting at. What's our starting values? Preparations, right? These are some of the skills that are going to be launching off of like your officers and such. So we'll see all of these activate. Now pre-combat, this is where you're going to see your abilities activating. Anything that's going to be affecting your troops, or sorry, your Stark Craft, or it's going to be what's affecting yours or your enemies. So we have our damage booster here. That was the one I was talking about. Standard damage dealt. Standard damage is like a basic attack from Rise to War. It's just their attack that they get every single round. Nice little boost, but it's getting us to one of his biggest damaging ability. Unstable energy, absolutely love this. I was talking about it in the guide. This is his bread and butter. I've seen several people post and not using this skill, and I cannot understand why. I highlighted them in the guide. You can gladly go over there and take a look, and maybe we'll see some in here where I can show you some of that difference. What difference is that 70% making? Then we see Dark Fang, he's activating his. So as you can see right here, it's telling us what's activating, and then follows is what is it doing? How is it impacting, right? So if I can click on it, tap on it, boom, exploit weakness, tells me what it is, so that way I don't have to memorize these. It's awesome. Nice little user interface. Here's this, competent crew, right? Tells me this. I look down, I can see the exact same things activating. So this is where we catch those bugs sometimes where it may say 10% power, but then we see plus 9% power. And it goes, that's not adding up. Why are those not the same? Bring that to the developers. They put it on their list. They start working it. So we read through this log in the beginning. We see a lot of things going on here. Me particularly, when I'm testing something, I'm looking for very specific stuff, right? I try to go against the same opponents, even if it's one of the challenges, so that way it's consistent. I'm looking for consistency, right? It's just like a science experiment. So I'm looking for my variable that I'm changing and seeing how is that impacting the fight. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down now that we understand kind of like what's going on there, but we're not looking for anything specific at this time. So we see here that the vampiric attack is activated by Dark Fang. So again, activated. Now we see that it's granted. We know that it's granted. It doesn't talk about any other options, right? So it's granted, and here it is actually triggering. So if you notice, we got verbiage: activated, granted, and triggered. This is important to understand what exactly is going on. So this right here is triggering that skill in order to cause the healing to happen. All right, you're not going to see this with every skill, but understand that sometimes you're going to get this 3-layered activation. Going to move, we got flamethrower. Now the werewolf's granted thermal attacks, opening taunt. These are some of the abilities of it. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So this right here is more of how we're used to seeing it in Rise to War. Down here, it gets different because it's almost backwards. So here we have the attack. Boom, this is the damage done to this individual. This is how many were killed. This is how many that are remaining. Here is where we see some of the abilities activating. So this is unstable energy. It doesn't tell me that, but I remember from using unstable energy that gives me the plus 70% bonus. It says granted. So that means that 50% chance activated. And that added that damage into this. Now, in Rise to War, we would see it more along these lines, where we would see that the granted bonus damage would come before the damage number. So it was almost in order. You would see it activating over time, and you could do the calculations in your head before you even reach the number. So here, it's a little bit different, as you can see. So we have another attack, but we see right here, launches Shatter Shot. So this is how I know this is a skill. It tells me the skill. And so I can see the skill activating. I can see the damage. Now, what happened after that, right? This is where, don't get confused, unstable energy bonus from Cypher has disappeared for Cypher. That happened before the damage. Okay? Because this right here is saying this one is what's wore off because it's only every other attack. Every attack has a 50% chance to activate. So this is it wearing off. Then it was granted again. That's why we have this big number here. So don't let this confuse you. These are basically, this is the damage that was done. This should, in my opinion, come at the end. So you see what damage was done, who he attacked, how much damage he dealt, how many he killed, how many's remaining. This should have came first. Should have said unstable energy bonus damage from Cypher has disappeared for Cypher. That should have been above Shattershot. So that way you know this was basically granted above the attack, and then it was gone. Then you launch Shattershot. Then you were granted this bonus, causing this much damage. After the damage was dealt, now they received damage increase plus 20%. That's this right here. That's that second part of that ability. So the next time they take damage, it's going to be 20% stronger. So now we move on to the second part of the Shattershot attack. So we see that it's against two enemy units. So we have that first instance. Now we have the second instance. Now why is this one 30,000 and this one's 13,000? That's the difference between unstable energy being not being activated and being activated. This is why I was harping on that and saying this is his bread and butter in that guide. So if we look at this, we see the Cyclops. We know that Cyclops is a large unit. It's a very tanky unit. It's hard to kill. And it also takes reduced damage. The Basilisk is a medium unit. It also is a little bit harder to kill, but doesn't have the defense or the health that the Cyclops has. But yet it took less than half. This is where I found it interesting. Okay, so this is the second attack. It hits for 13,000 compared to the 30,000. This is where we see it was the unstable energy of plus 70% damage was not activated. Now again, 70%, I see more than 70%. I see over double the amount of damage dealt because of this. That's huge. That's massive. That's why I go for it. I think that it scales exponentially when it comes to skills. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how the damage formula works, or at least a rough area, but it definitely is more than 70%, and I think that is how it is calculated. So here we see it without 13,000. So this right here, again, this damage boost was not granted. Cypher attacks. Because Cypher is a capital ship and Basilisk has a counterattack ability built into the unit, they cannot counterattack a capital ship. So that's why this was saying not granted. So that should follow the damage. And then they know that Basilisk receives the increased 20% damage on the next ability hit, or next damage received in general, sorry, just like the Cyclops did. That's how the flow is happening here. We move on to the next one, and we have First Blood. Love this skill. Amazing skill. Sadly, it doesn't do as much damage, not 400%, as the Shatter Shot, but it still does a lot of damage on two targets, and it causes them to, basically it activates more often. So that's why I like First Blood. We can see here's our damage, but again, we know that unstable energy was not activated, and this right here would have came before the damage. So that's why we have 9,097. Werewolf suffers damage dealt reduced minus 20%. So this is where we catch a bug. So what we see here is that First Blood is supposed to, at max level, next damage dealt is minus 50%. But here it's telling us it's 20%. So the description is not matching what is actually happening. This is how we catch the bugs. This is why it's important to read reports. And hopefully the developers will see this. They will see what we're talking about if it hasn't already been talked about. And boom, we can get this resolved in the future. But this isn't as big as some of the other bugs that we're seeing. So I'm not terrified, I'm really worried about it. This is just a nice little extra anyways. I'm there for the damage on First Blood. And so here we see the second attack for the First Blood, because First Blood hits 2 enemy units. So here's our second attack. And again, this should be above, because we were, even though we weren't granted it, that is the ability that was used. It's disappeared. Now it's time for a new instance of damage, right? And as we can see, 9,000, 24,000. This is both First Blood. Now, the Cypher is no longer under the effects of Shattershot. That should be below the damage. And here's why. This is what's happening right here. So First Blood is being activated on Basilisk. It is granted plus 70% bonus damage and plus 20% bonus damage or increased damage from the Shattershot. With that, that scales to 24,000. Now again, that's more than 70%. That's more than the 20% added. I'm not sure how that damage calculation is going, but I'm trying to get a rough estimate because that is really big numbers here. Now, because they took the damage, that Shattershot plus 20% bonus damage is now removed. Basilisk no longer has that applied to them because it was only the one next instance of damage. So that's what this right here is telling me, is that now the damage is dealt, that is gone. They're no longer under the effects of 20% increased damage. We go down. Basilisk is trying to counterattack because of their ability. Can't do that to a capital ship. Boom. It received bonus or reduced damage that came from First Blood. And so, supposed to be 50%. We get 20%. That's fine. This is another interesting one. So I haven't seen where he's actually gained another attack on a unit where he can counterattack from something activating similar to this. So I'm not sure if that is just more of a visual bug or if it's actually something that's activating. I'm going to do more research and I'll get back and try to. I might make another video and cover it if I see it, or I might just throw it into the Discord. We'll see. But to keep this video from getting too long, because I can get pretty nerdy on these things and really dive in deep, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Hopefully that helps you guys understand how the flow works and what is actually activating, because things aren't necessarily in order. If we come back up here to the top and we look at the heal and we see, hey, he activated the ability, Werewolf was granted the recovery because there is no chance. Here it is triggering to activate the heal. This is the flow in the order that I like to see because it makes sense. It seems to flow much smoother. When you get down here and you start seeing things where it feels like you're kind of jumping around, particularly, this one right here, right? We got this that should be above it. This should be coming after it. It can get kind of confusing and you don't understand what's activating in what order. But what's activating in what order is what matters, and that's where having Shattershot before the plus 20% bonus increase with First Blood activating after, understanding how to make that happen is what can lead to a 24,000 rather than a 9,000 or maybe even a 15,000, right? Big difference going on here. If you guys have any other questions when it comes to particular ships, I have no problem diving into it. If you guys would like to go into other aspects of the game, I may look at making more videos. I'm not entirely sure, but this is new for me. First video being made, and I'll kind of see how it's being received. And for now, you guys have a great day, and I will see you on the battlefield.